grazed his chin, and in response, Corny connected a hard hit to Baker's face. He could taste the blood as he fell to the ground. He was trying to block the wave of fists and kicks to his body on the ground, but then his vision goes out. Back at home, Baker's mom chastises him, saying, "Another fight? Really? Is this about the violent video games?" she asks, pointing at the PlayStation. Baker grabs a bag of ice and puts it on his leg and says, "She doesn't need to take his PlayStation away, please." He didn't start it anyway. She says, "You didn't? You threw the first punch." She then says, "Who's that kid you're always hanging out with? What's his name?" Baker says, "Who, Seb?" She says, "Yeah. I don't want you hanging out with him anymore. No more. You've been acting different since you started hanging out with him," pointing at his lip. Baker says he has not changed because of Seb. Or Cass, he thinks, but he would never tell his mom that he was friends with a 16-year-old girl. She would not approve of that. Baker asks, "Am I grounded?" But Lily Gray says no. But then asks him, "What could you have done different?" He ignores that question, and he just is happy that he gets to see Cass again. He remembers her pulling the intestine out of the pig and smiling at him. He felt a tingle in his groin when she did that. Baker's mom asks again, "What are you thinking about?" He says, "Nothing." And then she asks the same question again. "What could you have done different?" Baker says, "I could have walked away." She says, "That's right. Don't make me regret not grounding you." He says, he's sorry. And his mom says, she knows. She hugs him and then says she feels like this is her fault, moving around so much. Baker then says, "I love you, Mom." Then his mom says, "How about this? No more moving. If you promise to not get into any more fights, I'll make sure I get no promotions or changing location." Tears well up in Baker's eyes and he says, "Really?" She says if he gets into no more fights, she'll promise. She then asks, "Are you going to be okay?" And Baker says he will. He'll be okay. He doesn't know why, but he felt like that was a lie. 85 days left. "That motherfucker," Cass says, looking at Baker's busted lip. Seb asks, "Do you want another soda?" But Cass smiles smugly and says, "Have you got anything stronger?" She looks back at Baker and says, "Oh, she's so fucking pissed at that kid. If she was here, that never would have happened." She asks, "What's the kid's name?" And the boys say, "It's a kid named Cornelius McCarthy." She says, Good. Where does he live?" The boys look at each other and they say, "They don't know, but why?" She says, "She wants to have a little fun with him." Baker says, "That's not a good idea." She touches his face and his lip. The feeling was electric to Baker, and she says, "You're gonna let him win?" She asks. He says he promised his mom. She scoffs and says, "Your mom?" almost mockingly. Baker says, "Yeah, he promised her he wouldn't get in any more trouble, and she told him that if he did, they wouldn't have to move anymore." She says, "Oh, that is a good deal." Baker says he wants to stay here. He likes it here. Cass bites her lip and says, "Home, huh?" She looked weird and then put a hand on Baker's thigh, and the feeling was strange to him. His testicles shriveled up. "I like you here too, Bake. I want you both to stay here." Baker liked that. She called him Bake, not New Kid or Baker. She takes her hand off his thigh, and it takes him a while to feel normal again after that. 76 days left. Baker and Seb walk into the heart of the woods in the early November cold. "What are we gonna do today?" Seb says as he kicks a tree, hyped up on energy drinks. Baker thinks it's way too early for this shit. But Seb called him 2 hours ago and said Cass has a gift for them. So he figured he'd go. They walked deep into the woods where Cass said to go. Past a bloody tree where they cut their thumbs and labeled themselves a tribe. "Boo!" Cass jumps out and scares them. Baker tells her not to do that as he holds his heart. She gives them blindfolds and leads them deeper into the woods. Baker didn't want to, but she raised her brow when asking, which always made him fold. So he puts on the blindfold and she tells him, "No peeking." She leads them deeper into the woods and says, "Okay, take him off. You're gonna love this." Baker takes off his blindfold and is horrified by what he sees. "Cass, what have you done?" In front of them, tied to a tree stump, was Cornelius McCarthy. His pants pulled down around his ankles, a rope in his mouth, and holes in his t-shirt from whatever Cass did. "How?" Baker starts, but Cass cuts him off and says, "How did I get him here?" Easy. Boys like him are easy to trick. They only have one thing on their mind. I said I'd suck his dick and he followed me anywhere. I didn't, obviously, but here he is. She takes out a butterfly knife and points it at him. Baker looks horrified and Cass notices. "Aren't you happy? This is how we win, Bake." She looks to him and she says she just wants to have some fun. She takes the knife out and approaches him. Baker thinks that she's gonna gut him like a pig, but then she cuts his arms loose. She says he better not move or she'll stab him. He cries weakly. Corny, right? That's what they call you? He nods his head.
Yep.
Baker looks away and Cass says, are you gonna barf again, Bake? Baker says, no. And she says, well, we have to toughen you up. We haven't even cut him open yet. At this, Cornelia starts flailing, but then she points the knife closer to his neck and says, she's just kidding, relax. Seb says, we're not? Cass laughs and says, should we? Seb says, they should get revenge for what he did to Baker. Cass approaches Corny and says, I heard you and your friends beat the shit out of my boyfriend. Boyfriend? Baker thinks. However, he doesn't want this. This is too much. But a part of him likes this. He thinks this is revenge. This is winning. Cass rips the tape off of Corny's mouth and asks, why did you and your friends beat up my boyfriend? He looks around and says, he doesn't know. Seb runs up to him with his fists cocked and says, liar. Cass looks at him and says, easy, Tiger. Easy. All on good time. Cass tells Corny to try again. Corny looks at Baker and says, I don't know. I guess because he was an easy target? He says as if it was a question. She asks him to explain. Corny says, Baker has no friends, and I don't like his face. Now angry. Cass says, that's fine, that's fine. But now, we have to give you a punishment. Cass looks evilly at him and says, have you ever heard of public humiliation, Corny? Have you ever touched yourself, Corny? Corny looks around. He says nothing. Cass says, you know, jerked off, jacked off, fed the geese, choked the snake. He begs, but Cass says, for fuck's sake. She goes over and cuts his underwear off and takes his manhood in her fingers and puts a knife to it. Do it, or I'll cut it off. Corny cries, and Baker thinks this is too far. But at the same time, he thinks Corny probably won't ever fuck with him again. And action, Cass says, stepping away. I obviously can't describe this scene, but he tries and really can't do anything. Cass looks at Seb and Baker after a good 10 minutes and just says, okay, this isn't working. Can we just let him go? Has he suffered enough? Both of the boys say, yeah, nervously. She cuts Corny loose and tells him, if you ever tell anyone what happened here this morning, I'll slit your fucking throat with your family. He cries and runs away. Seb asks, you just gonna let him run? And Cass says, yeah, he's a good little piggy now. And good little piggies don't squeal.
Yep.
Now let's get some food. Doing God's work makes me hungry. 70 days remain. In the movie theater, Baker, Seb, and Cass walk down the white hallway. Quick, before someone sees, the usher says to Cass and hurries them along. Thanks, Merle, she says, rubbing her hand down his uniform. He licks his lips during this and closes his eyes. The R-rated action movie muffled from the room over. Merle pushes Baker and Seb through the employees-only door and grabs Cass. You promised, he says to her. Cass says, but the movie's starting. But he licks his lips again, and Baker feels like his eyes are almost glowing like a predatory yellow. You promised, Merle says. Baker thinks to himself, you know what she promised him, don't you? Cass looks at Seb and Baker and tells him, we'll get seats. I'll be right there. Baker tries to say something in protest, but she says, I'll be fine. Seb and Baker go in alone and take their seats. About 10 minutes later, Cass comes in and joins them. She looks right at Baker, and before he can ask what that was, she says, don't worry about that. I just had to pay my debt. Always pay your debts, Baker, she says with a wink. They sit through the movie and all agree it kind of sucked. Not enough boobs, Seb says. Cass says, you like boobs, Seb? Want to see mine? His eyes quickly focus on her chest, but he quickly looks away and says, yeah, right. But sure enough, she quickly unzips her jacket and flashes them both. Baker sees it too, but before they can say anything else, she's already gone and skipping up the movie theater alley. They all share a cigarette, and before Baker can really recover from what happened, she says, alright, she's going home. She walks away, and Baker turns to Seb and asks, you want to follow her? Seb says, why? You just want to watch her changing through her window or something? Baker says, she's our friend. I have more respect for her than that. But he is kind of curious where she lives. She's been to both of our houses. Aren't you curious where she lives? Seb says, no, not really. But good luck. Let me know if you see some skin. Call me when you get home. Baker quickly follows Cass behind and hides behind trees and anything he can. At some point, she turns around and he's sure that she saw him, but she turns right back around. She gets towards a couple of houses and then does a spin again. Baker quickly ducks behind a car and closes his eyes. When he opens them, someone's standing over him. "What are you doing?" a man's voice says. He looks up and sees an older man. Baker quickly makes up a lie and says, "He got lost." The man says, "You need to be careful. This is a nice neighborhood, but there's a lot of weirdos out of dark." Baker tells the man his address, and the man looks it up on his phone and tells him how to get home. He walks home thinking about the pig guts and Cass. 66 days left. They all sit in the abandoned house, their new clubhouse. Dirt all over the carpets and broken glass from bottles all over. "You think anyone squats here?" Baker asks. "What, you scared of the bums?" Cass says. Baker says no. Actually, yes, after thinking about it. Seb says something about Corny, and Cass asks, "What did he do now?" Baker says they don't know it was him, but on the locker room wall, graffiti was written that said, "Baker Gray sucks dog dick," but they don't know if it was him. Cass then goes into the other room and calls for Baker to come with her. Baker looks at Seb, hopes to see him to tell Baker to run, but he just follows Cass. As he leaves Seb, he thinks he sees a look of resentment in his eyes, or jealousy. As he walks towards the other room, he thinks about it. This is like a cult. Cass wouldn't let them leave even if they wanted to. He doesn't want to get on her bad side and end up tied to a tree with his dick in his hand like Corny. But does he even really want to leave her? Call it love or whatever, but Baker doesn't seem to know what love is. But Cass is the first thing he thinks about in the morning and the last thing he thinks about before he goes to bed. Is that love? He sometimes even dreams about her where he was Myrtle in the movie theater. She takes him behind the movie theater and kisses him and then slits his throat with the butterfly knife, but then he wakes up. "What's wrong, new kid?" she says in the dream. He snaps out of it, then enters the room where Cass is. There's graffiti of unmentionable things and bubble letters all over. There's a window in this room and you can see the sun just start to fall in the school night sky. He has to leave soon. Cass closes the door and tells him, "Come here." He does, and he can feel a weird ghost vision of her in his mind saying, "Good boy, good boy." She points out the window and says, "Miss Clement lives right across the street there, you know. But that just means we'll have to be extra sneaky." "But you're good at being sneaky, right?" "I know that was you the other night following me. Don't play dumb." She pulls out the butterfly knife and every muscle freezes and all he can say is, "I'm sorry." She gets closer and there's a fire in her eyes, one from the depths of hell itself. He waits for her to slit his throat, but she doesn't. She says, "It's fine. So why'd you do it?" Baker stammers and says, "He just wanted to see where she lived. Maybe he'd get to know her better." She says, "Are you looking at my house?" He says it sounds stupid when she says it like that. Cass says that's because it is stupid. She then says, "Whatever, and look at the walls. What do you see?" Baker says, "Graffiti?" She pulls him closer so his head is on her boob. He feels warm and tingly. "What do you see beyond the art on the wall?" Baker laughs and says he wouldn't actually call it art. Cass says everything they do is art. Everything anyone does is art. The graffiti is the artist's blood. She takes out the butterfly knife and cuts her palm open and smears the blood all over her hand. She then places her crimson handprint on the wall near the graffiti. And then she invites Baker to do the same. "Come on, Bake. Become the art." He hesitates, and she says, "What, are you worrying? You're ready for this, Bake. So much more ready than Seb." Baker knows that if he doesn't do this, she'll call Seb in and he'll do it no problem. She comes over to him and sticks the middle of the butterfly knife in his palm. She says, "It hurts less when you don't worry." The warm trickle comes and she smears it all over his hand. She then puts his hand next to hers on the wall, and then grabs his hand with her bloody hand and they interlock fingers after. They are intertwined, their blood flowing between both of them. Baker thinks they're one now. Her blood in his body. She rushes through his body in that way. Her blood in his veins, in his arms, legs, brain, and other places. Feel that, Bake? The art that flows through me now flows through you. And all of a sudden they hear a faint footstep walking down the hall and a bored whistle. But Baker pays no mind to Seb in the hallway. He feels like he's in heaven. Or maybe the fiery pits of hell. 59 days left. Christmas Eve. Baker rolls out of bed and looks at his clock. 11:40 a.m. He knows he has to get up though. He made plans for today. But life is good right now. Corny has left him alone and he doesn't have to worry about moving anymore. And besides, tomorrow's Christmas. He goes downstairs after showering and sees his mom. Merry Christmas Eve, they say to each other. She asks if he has plans today, and he lies and says, yeah, he's going to the park to play football with some friends. She says he's never home anymore, which is a good thing, but she's surprised. Baker says before, he never bothered making friends because they moved around so much. His mom frowns and looks sad. Baker thinks that she knows it's her fault. I'm sorry, kiddo, she says. Baker thinks it looks like she's blinking away tears. She says make sure he comes home for dinner at least. She's making his favorite Christmas Eve tradition, seafood lasagna. Fucking gross, by the way. Baker says actually he wants to be honest. He doesn't really like the seafood lasagna. He always puts up with it because his mom likes it. She laughs and says she only makes it because she thought he liked it. They both laugh about how for the past 10 years she's made it for every Christmas Eve because she thought Baker liked it, and he didn't say anything because he thought she liked it. He sits down for breakfast, thinking he's going to be late, but he wants to spend some time with his mom this morning. She asks how's the cut on his hand doing. Baker lied and said it was from jumping a fence, and he said it's doing okay now. She says don't jump any fences going to the park today, okay? A vision of Cass in Baker's head says, there are fences all around us in this world, and we're gonna climb them all. Baker got to the abandoned house a bit later. You're late, Bake, she says as she tosses down a nudie mag. Seb curses his cell phone for bad service in the corner at the same time. Baker says it isn't that late. Besides, he was with his mom. Cass says, oh, I'm happy for you. She says it weirdly, and as if she sees that Baker's confused by how she said it, Hello. She continues, I am, really. They sit.
Sorry, no voice. A wild Feebas appears captured using poke catch, winners revealed in 90s. Feebas escaped. No one caught it.
Yeah. 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 Oh. Yeah. Yep. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 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 Yep. Wow. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Sit in a small circle and they take out their presents for each other, and Cass calls out, "Ooh, I can't wait. I love Christmas." Baker gives the first gift to Seb. Seb shakes it and opens it. "Dude, you didn't have to do this." He pulls out a new PlayStation controller. Your X button was sticking on the other one. Seb looks sad and says, "I feel like a dick for my present now. I thought we were doing small gifts. This must have cost you like $60. Seb hands Baker his gift and Baker opens it. It's a Geode starter kit. Baker flashes the biggest smile he can muster and says he loves it. Really? Seb says he knows it sucks. Baker says no, clothes would have sucked. Baker asks, what did Seb get Cass? And Cass says, it's a secret, and winks at Seb. Isn't that right, Sebby? Baker clenches his jaw and thinks, Sebby? Cass then pulls out 2 boxes. These are you two's gifts, she says. He hopes it's not pig guts or Corny's penis, but he stops himself. That's not nice to think Cass would do such things. He opens it, and it's a necklace. A heart-shaped necklace. Inside the heart is a picture of Cass, her bleach blonde hair over her eyes as she smiles. Both Seb and Baker look at each other, and Cass notices and says, I know it's a little girly, but I thought you guys would like it. Seb says really fast, I love it. It's the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. Baker doesn't buy that for a second. Cass looks at him after saying she's happy that Seb said that. Yeah, it's really good. I'll wear it, Baker says. Damn right you will, she says, as they come in for a group hug. Damn right. Baker gets home later and his mom asks how the game was. He puts his necklace in his pocket because there's no way his mom would allow him to be that close to Cass. She doesn't even know about Cass. And quickly she notices the geode kit in his hands. Baker says, oh, Seb was at the game and he gave me a Christmas present. Oh, Seb, she says, like his name was something sour in her mouth. Baker says, you don't even know Seb, you've never met him. She says she knows, but Baker's gotten into fights, and he's changed since he met Seb. It worries her. He says, if she met him, she might like him. She then says, well then invite him over for dinner sometime. Baker says, fine, and then they drop the conversation. Baker goes to his room to get ready for dinner, and he throws his coat on the bed, and something hits the bed with a hard thud. He picks it up and sees that Cass snuck him an extra gift in a little box in his pocket. On it was a note that said, Baker, here's something extra for you. I figured you'd like this more than a silly necklace. P.S. Don't tell Seb. I think he's getting jealous. Love, Cass. He read that word again. Love. He thinks to himself, he is in love. He is obsessed. A vision of her in her head saying, I am inside you. My art is
A wild
inside
braviary
you.
appears catch it using
Plays over
poke
and over.
catch. Winners
He
revealed in
opens
90s.
the box and hopes once again it's not Corny's penis, but he opens it and it's a butterfly knife. The same one she threatened Corny with. His mom yells at him to come down for dinner. 49 days left. Mrs. Delgado stands in front of the class with Principal Walters. He urges her to continue, but there's a pressure in the air. As you all may have heard, Cornelius McCarthy has gone missing. There it was. There were rumors in school, but now it was confirmed. Corny had gone missing. Murmurs start up, and the principal says that they are all going to do an exercise because finding Cornelius McCarthy is the utmost importance. We are going to do this exercise, and I'm going to talk to each and every one of you independently and ask you what you all know, he says. The principal points at Baker first and says, he's up first. Baker looks around, and the principal says, that's right, you first. Baker swallows and follows the principal to his office. When he gets there, Baker thinks it smells like old books. The principal says he's going to come right out and say it. He doesn't think that Baker had anything to do with it. He knows that he and Cornelius got into fights, but he thinks that Baker is a good egg. But he has to check all possible avenues to find this boy and bring him home. Baker remembers some of his mom's murder shows. You mean like Persons of Interest? The principal says it's not that serious, but yeah. He asks straight up, do you know what happened to Cornelius, Baker? Do you know anyone who would
Braviary
want to hurt
escaped.
him?
No one
Baker
caught
says
it.
straight up, no. The principal says, okay. That's all I have to ask you. And he lets him go. As he walks away, Baker says he feels guilty, but he doesn't know why. After school, Baker walks home. He usually does this with Seb, but Seb was weirdly absent today. Baker figures he has the flu, and he walks home with the after-school euphoria. He expected the talk to go a lot worse with the principal, but it actually wasn't that bad. It was pretty quick. He thinks that Cass wasn't even brought up in that talk, but it doesn't matter. Cass wouldn't have done anything, right? No, she couldn't have. She made her point in the woods that day, and no one would say anything about that anyway. But part of him wonders. Cass overheard that conversation with Seb about the graffiti on the wall with his name in it. But no, Cass would never do something like that. Cornelius just ran away from home. Kids do that all the time. Hey you! Someone calls up from behind him as he walks. He turns around and sees 4 high school boys. He thinks about running, but just walks up to him. Yeah, I thought it was you. So where is she? The high schooler asks. Baker doesn't understand. She's always doing dumb shit. No one's seen her since she got into it with Mr. Wilson. She hasn't been in class either, the high schooler says again. Another high schooler says, is that chick fucked up or what, kid? Baker understands who they are talking about now. Cass. So he doesn't know what they're talking about. Why didn't Cass tell them about all this? Is that chick psycho or what? I heard she had an abortion a few years ago and hadn't been the same since, one of the other high schoolers say. And Baker says, abortion? The leader of the boys says, kid, do you even know who you're hanging out with? How old even are you? He asks. Baker replies, 14. They all laugh. 14? Man, she likes him young. You tapping that kid? You fucking her? He walks away, but they all hoot and holler and laugh and ask, where's he going? He wants to fight them, but he promised his mom. He thinks of her, his happy place. All the Christmas presents she gave him that she probably can't afford. He has to think of his mom. He walks away, and the vision of Cass in his mind says to him, I gave you that butterfly knife for a reason. Baker ignores the vision. He goes home and eats the ziti his mom left out for him.
So what, do you know? Hey!
48 days left. Baker got to the house and looked around at its emptiness. There was also glass all over from Seb throwing bottles. He wondered what it would look like with the couch. On a couch, he could kiss Cass on it, or explore her with unfamiliar hands. Both of them are about to get here, but he wishes it was just Seb today. He wants to tell him about what those high schoolers said about Cass and discuss that. As he thinks this, he hears Cass and Seb coming in the room. Cass kicks the broken glass on the ground and scolds Seb. She says, this place isn't a dump, Seb. This is our second home now. Seb puts his metaphorical tail between his legs and says, okay. Seb says, she's right. He even is going to come here and sleep sometimes when spring rolls around. Cass squeals and says, ooh, a slumber party. Baker says that his mom probably won't let him. Cass says, come on, just say you're sleeping at Seb's house. Baker says, unfortunately, his mom doesn't really like Seb. He says, sorry, Seb. And Seb just absentmindedly says, yeah. Cass rubs Baker's leg and says, just make up a different friend then. He isn't sure if this rub was friendly or something more. Seb, drunk, all of a sudden says, when we die, you think we'll haunt places? Places like this? Cass asks, where did that come from? But she doesn't want to talk about this. Baker says, maybe it's like in the movies. The people who have unfinished business stay as ghosts. Others move on. Cass says that's bullshit. Then, you know what I think? I think we come into this world as worm food, and we leave as worm food. The boys laugh, and she continues. Come help me clean up worm food estates now, huh? Seb and Baker both say that seems like a good name for this place. Worm food estate. 47 days left. Gerald Clement wakes up to the smell of coffee in his nostrils. He forgets his dream pretty fast, and he puts his hand on the other side of the bed. His wife Alyssa
Yo,
must have already
sorry
left
for
work.
popping in. I
He
do
gets dressed in
custom
the
art
same
for
old outfit.
streamers.
Alyssa
Felt
hates
like
this
my
outfit,
style
but
might
he
fit
likes
your
the way he
stream.
dresses.
Wanna
He likes
see?
himself. Maybe too much sometimes. He goes downstairs and gets the Keurig ready and wonders if Alyssa's still mad at him.
I am good.
He had an emotional affair with a woman at his job. But he thinks emotional affairs are not real affairs, right? He finds a note on the table. It must be from Alyssa. I'd like to try again. A. With the heart around the A. Alyssa must not be mad anymore. He wonders if trying for another kid is right at the moment, though. Why can't she just be happy? She has a good job at the school as a guidance counselor, and his job gives them freedom. Why do they have to ruin it with another kid? Isn't he enough for her? He was even there when her father died emotionally, but she isn't there for him in the bedroom. To him, sex is a big band-aid, and the fact that they do it just to reproduce bothers him. 3 affairs can attest to that. He looks at the note again and sees at the bottom he missed 3 words on it. I love you. A sentence they've said to each other plenty of times over 18 years, but for some reason, this hurts him. Bad. Every single bad deed Gerald has ever done comes rushing back to him. Sorry.
At Lord Poundsalot, you didn't wanna check out my art? No thanks. Okay. Thank you.
What?
Oh shit lol.
What? Yeah. Yoy. Yeah. Yoy. What? Oh. Yeah. Oh. Yoy.
A wild whale appears. Catch it using poke catch. Winners revealed in 90s.
Yeah. What? Yeah. 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 Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Whalmer escaped. No one caught it.
Yeah. What? Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Hey. Yep. 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 Yeah. Yep. Oh. Yoy. What? Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 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 Oh. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Wow. Yep. Oh. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Oh. hip, yoy. What? Yeah. Yoy. Yeah. Oh. Yoy. What? Hip. Yeah. Hip. Yeah. Yeah. Hip. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Hip. Hip. Hip.
A wild centrid appears capture using poke catch. Winners revealed in 90s.
Hip. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
Sentret escaped. No one caught it.
Yep. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Yep. 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 Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. 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 Yep. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. 哇，hip， 哟，哦，哟，呀，哦，我哟。Yep. Ja. Ja. Hip. Oh. What?
A wild Zigzagoon appears. Catch it using Poke Catch. Winners revealed in 90s.
Yep. Yep. Ja. 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 Ja.
Zigzagoon escaped. No one caught it.
Ja. What? Ja. Yeah. Yeah. Hip. Hip. Yeah. Yeah. Hip. Yeah. 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 Hip. Yeah. Yeah. Hip. 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 Hoot. Hip. Yeah. Hip. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
A wild Butterfree F appears. Catch it using Poke Catch. Winners revealed in 90s. Butterfree F escaped. No one caught it.
Yeah. Hip. 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 Yep.
A wild wormadam appears captured using poke catch, winners revealed in 90s.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Wormadam escaped. No one caught it.